Hello, I'm Zoe Lodrick. Brighton Therapy Partnership have asked me to do a short clip to introduce a workshop that I'm going to be running for them on Saturday the 27th of November 2021. The workshop's entitled Understanding Sexualised Trauma. What I'll plan to cover in that workshop is briefly the offender psychology, because that's where the offence begins. I'll front load some of how the offender psychology impacts the victim psychology, very clear interplay between how sex offenders make it okay in their own head to do what they do and how victims of sex crime are often left feeling guilty and ashamed. The majority of the day is going to be spent looking at the impact of trauma. Neurobiology is what I'm going to talk about. What happens in the brain when we experience threat, how that then impacts on how we behave under threat. Ultimately, how that will impact on people's ability to make sense of their own behaviour, let alone to put it in some words that could tell you or me or anybody else about. That neurobiology I'll utilise to help you to understand the legacy of trauma. Nobody ever came to therapy because they'd experienced trauma, because they've been raped or abused or exploited. They come to therapy because they've experienced a trauma and it's now impacting them. Trauma is a time displacement disorder. That which happened back then doesn't remain back then. It lives on in the person's nervous system. So I'll use the neurobiology to help you to understand how that's happening, what's going on, and we'll talk about what we as counsellors and therapists can do in order to best help people to move on from that. We cannot change what's happened. If we could, we probably would. We can't. It's happened. What we do have some control over, of course, is the response they're going to get from us in the work that we're doing with them, and hopefully will help them become safer for the future. That neurobiology will talk about trauma symptomatology, where they're sitting, what's going on. You know, psychoeducation is often useful with survivors of significant interpersonal traumas to help them to understand where those trauma symptoms are sitting. So we'll talk about trauma symptomatology. We'll talk about what we might be doing to help people to regulate their nervous systems in order to help them to move on from that. I'd really welcome you to join me Saturday the 27th of November. You book via the Brighton Therapy Partnership's website, and I hope to see some of you there. Thank you.